This episode of CarePoints is sponsored by Alero's Active Fall Prevention Solution, powered by Ocuvera.
Welcome to the latest episode of CarePoints. I'm your host, Kenny Schiff, Chief Marketing Officer for Lone Star Communications. Today's episode is one of my continuing series of conversations with collaborators at Lone Star, customers, partners, and notable folks in the tech industry. It is my pleasure to interview Steve Kiene, co-founder and CEO of Ocuvera.
Thank you.
Let me set up this episode. Steve is the visionary CEO of Ocuvera, and he has been working on the transformative impact of AI, especially as in regards to patient safety in healthcare, since the humble beginnings of his company in 2013. I'm going to get Steve to share his journey, explore the innovative solutions that his company Ocuvera is bringing to hospitals, and talk about how Ocuvera is applying its capabilities, especially around patient fall prevention. Good afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon, Kenny. Thanks for having me.
So, Steve, why don't you give us a little background and tell us about the genesis of Ocuvera?
Sure. So we've got a long history in computer vision and AI and all of those buzzwords that are ubiquitous now, but 10, 15 years ago really weren't mainstream. We got involved in healthcare from the standpoint of looking at rehab and using cameras and computers to assist with rehab, when we had a potential customer ask us, could we use this solution for fall prevention? I didn't know what that meant, so I did a little bit of research, and it was outstanding to see that there are over 1 million falls in hospitals in the U.S. every year. And that's in spite of there being a multitude of best practices and procedures and technologies that are in place. With all of those solutions, it was clear they weren't effective. And so when we kind of stepped back and looked, we saw that really historically fall prevention was addressed with proactive procedures, but that didn't result in meaningful sustained reductions in falls. You'd see a reduction in falls for 2 or 3 months when those procedures were put in place, and then the falls would creep back up as those procedures kind of fell by the wayside and staff got busy. The other side of it was technology. The technology that was available was ineffective because it was reactive to what the patient was doing. So what we decided was there was a need for proactive technology. And that's what led us down the path of trying to use cameras and AI to watch a patient and quite literally attempt to predict their intent to get out of the bed or the chair, and then alert a nurse when we predicted that that was going to occur.
So there's lots of people in the market today who are promising similar capabilities and amplifying the words, as you said, virtual care, ambient listening, AI. But you guys have been at this for a while, so you're not a newcomer. And I think based on the conversations that we had planning, you've learned a lot. And what distinguishes Ocuvera is that you have a practical sense of how to actually get this done, and you have a customer base where you've been able to prove that out. So why don't you tell us about the customer base and what you've learned and how you're looking at continuing to grow that?
Sure. I think that we've taken a very specific and disciplined approach to address a very specific problem. And that is literally the problem of patients exiting the bed or the chair in a hospital room. We're not focused on the home. We're not focused on long-term care yet. We're not focused on the the surgical centers or other places in the hospital. We were focused on the patient room and the problem of the patient getting out of bed without assistance when they're not in a physical condition to do so. And we address that by talking to nurses, talking to unit leaders, talking to those that are involved in trying to reduce falls, understanding their problems, their challenges, the shortcomings of their approaches, and trying to figure out where to bring technology, where to bring best practices, where to bring the right pieces to a solution. And then as we develop that, continually listening to the customer and what they didn't like, what they found not valuable, and getting rid of those things. And then making sure that we tested those solutions across a number of early adopters and objectively measured the results. Reduction in falls, reduction in alarm response times, impact to the financial bottom line. And when we felt that our overall solution was mature enough, then we brought it to the general market. So we didn't hype something, we didn't overpromise, we didn't bring out an MVP. We worked until we had technology, best practices, clinical integration, and then we brought that to market. And I think we've been very honest about the results that we have. We don't cherry pick 2 months of great time in a facility and promise that. We talk about what we can do over the long term, and we talk about that there is no magic bullet, that we are an effective tool to use in certain circumstances, and make sure that the customer clearly understands when and where we can be used and what impact that they will see from that. And I think that's led to us having a reputation of, what you see is what you get. And if what we have is what you need, then you'll get results from it.
So let's have you paint a picture of what it's like to deploy Ocuvera, both at the room level, from an organization level, and how you would partner with the customer. And you elaborate a little bit on how you work with the customer, but why don't you take us a little further to bring this to life for the people who are listening?
Sure, you bet. So we bring a camera-based device into the hospital room, and you could do that by mounting something on the wall. You could wheel it in on a cart. We found shortcomings with both of those. So what we developed is a small, lightweight, portable sensor that can be carried from room to room. It weighs about 3 pounds, and there are what we call wall docks that are put on the foot wall of the hospital room, usually kind of near where the TV or the whiteboard is. In Texas, we call those holsters, but whatever you want to call it, those are mounted in every room. And then that portable sensor can be brought into the room, placed on that dock. Then there's a touchscreen on the device. The nurse can click a button to start monitoring the patient. At that point, the system is operational, is watching for adverse events. The other part of it is a central monitoring station, which is a screen that can be put at the nurse's station in every unit that uses Ocuvera, so that nurses can glance over to see live video feed of the patients that are being monitored. And then the third component is a mobile app that can be put on the nurses' phones or tablets so that they can receive alerts at the point of care. When there is an alert, the system sends that to the mobile app, so to the nurse's pocket. It sends it to that central monitoring station. The nurse can see a live video feed of the patient and then can speak with the patient with two-way audio capability to intervene with the event. So we try to bring quick decision making to the nurse's hands. So we use AI to do the boring things like watch a patient. And then when there is a concern, we bring a human into it and let a human make the final decision of what to do, when to do it, how to do it. We don't expect AI to take care of a patient. We try to use AI to make a nurse's job easier. Along with that, it's not just taking that technology and saying, okay, now use it. It's about working with the hospital, understanding what are their current interventions for falls, what are their current workflows for alarms, and bringing Ocuvera in, fitting it into their current workflows, making suggestions on changes that they could make to those workflows based on the availability of our technology. Make sure they understand where it's appropriate to use Ocuvera, where it's not appropriate. If you've got a patient that is pulls PICC lines, or a patient that is self-harm, you don't want AI watching that patient. But if you've got a patient who is a fall risk because of surgery or medications or other physical conditions, then Ocuvera is a good fit. And we make sure that they understand how to make those choices in a prescribed manner. And then we back that with analytics so that nurse leadership can be looking at things like what's the alarm response time? What are the number of falls? And both on Ocuvera and off Ocuvera. And we work with them to make improvements to all of those processes. I think that that's an aspect of a solution that oftentimes is overlooked nowadays, that technology is viewed as the solution. Technology isn't the solution. It's part of a tool. The solution really is clinical workflows, clinical consulting to use the appropriate tools at the appropriate time.
So a lot of people have concerns about AI and especially cameras and video from a privacy perspective. So we would be remiss to not at least tell the world about Ocuvera's approach to managing privacy.
Yep, absolutely. I think that no one wants to be on a live video stream. So having a camera in the hospital room sounds pretty invasive, sounds pretty scary, and really doesn't help a patient feel more dignified when they're in the hospital. The type of camera technology we use is not like on your phone. It's a special kind of camera that sees in distance or sees in depth, we call it. And so it paints an internal three-dimensional image of the room, which is not in color. It's really not normally human viewable. It is like a three-dimensional map, and it's inherently privacy preserving because it doesn't show enough detail to make out the full facial features, for example, of a person. And so the video feed that we show nurses is kind of a visual interpretation of that three-dimensional map that looks a lot like a night vision camera. So you can tell there's a patient, you can tell that they're moving, but you can't tell if that's your neighbor or your sister or whomever. It is simply a person. And that's really important from a privacy standpoint. It's really important from a dignity standpoint. People are in the hospital because they need care and they need to feel safe and they need to feel dignified. But nurses need to be able to see them when they're not there to help provide additional care. And so we've really worked hard to balance providing a video feed for nurses, but yet making patients and families feel like that their loved one is not on television.
So you've been at this for 12 years. And one of the things that I have learned about what your process has been is that you have compiled a lot of hours of event, call it what you will, footage. Tell us a little bit about that and why it distinguishes your ability to do this in a different way.
Yeah, so when we started tackling this problem, if you're going to use artificial intelligence or you're going to train an AI model, if you will, you need to have data for it. And while we were developing Ocuvera, I had my first child. And so while we're trying to train it to understand what's happening in a hospital room, I'm trying to teach my little boy, what's red, what's green, what's a square, what's a triangle. And really the approaches are the same. It's repetition. You show a child enough pictures of a square versus a triangle, they're going to be able to differentiate. It's no different with artificial intelligence and computer vision. You provide enough data that it can start to learn specifics. And so the only way to do that for us was to collect video in hospital rooms. So we went to over a dozen different hospitals. We worked with their IRBs, or their institutional review boards, to set up a study to collect video of patients. We physically, in person, consented over 10,000 patients. And we literally went in and said, we'd like to record video of you. It's going to be of no benefit to you, but it's going to help us attempt to build something that's going to help keep patients safe. And virtually everybody agreed to do that. So we set up cameras, we recorded video, we brought that video back to our office. overall, we collected about 300,000 hours of video. And then we had humans go through that video and do what we call tagging. It's basically looking at the video, marking things like where's the bed, where's a chair, where's the patient's body, where are the bed rails, is the patient sitting up, are they eating, where are the covers, all of those things that we would tag or mark in the video. And then as the system was being told what things were, it's trying to figure out and understand, and it learns if it's right or wrong on its guesses, and based on that, it just continually improves. So having real video of real patients was really important, especially having real video of patients who got out of bed and then fell. We've watched a lot of video of patients who fall. It's not comfortable to see, but it is extremely important because what we learned was how a patient gets out of bed and then subsequently falls is oftentimes very different than what people think. They don't just sit up, flip the covers off, hop out of bed. They might climb over the foot of the bed. They might roll over the bed rail. They might grab onto the tray table and have it slide and fall out. There's a variety of ways the falls actually happen. And what it really did was help us understand what's really happening in the hospital room. We used to talk about how we are seeing what's previously been unseen. Not a lot of nurses have actually seen a fall. Not a lot of nurses have seen what has led up to a fall. We've seen an awful lot of that, and we try to use that both in how we trained our AI system to work with real data, real people, so that when it's watching real people, it understands it, but also in talking to clinical staff. This is what happens when your patient tries to get out of bed. This is what happens when they're trying to ambulate around the room and then fall. And with all due respect to experts in falls and experts in fall prevention, there's a lot of things that get put in place that really aren't needed. People rarely fall because something is not secured in the room. They rarely fall because they trip over something. They rarely fall somewhere where there would be a crash pad on the floor. That just isn't what happens, and that an awful lot of the interventions that are put in place really aren't needed because they aren't having any impact. That's where we focus on getting a nurse intervening with the patient before they've gotten out of bed. That's how you prevent falls.
So the potential partnership between Ocuvera or an entity like our Alero or our main core Lone Star communications business is in a position to have a continuous improvement model with the customer. So you have folks, all the work that you did up front that helped you develop the solution, great. It's an incredible foundation, but you haven't stopped, right? You're continuing to use data that you're receiving to continue to improve your model.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit on several things that I want to actually talk about, and that is that while we have something that's really cool in one sense, that hey, wow, there's this camera and it can predict that a person's going to get out of bed, and that seems magical. That really is nothing. That's simply a tool that a nurse can use. And I'm very quick to always say, Ocuvera does not prevent falls. Nurses prevent falls. What we are is a tool that gives the nurse greater ability to provide safer care, because the nurse can get notified when someone is going to get out of bed and intervene before that. But all of that isn't even really the overall solution. It's knowing when to use it. It's knowing how to make changes to alarm workflows so that the right nurse is alerted at the right time. And that all involves what I call clinical consulting. Basically, it's working with the customer, getting the technology used, looking at analytics and determining, let's make some changes to when it's being used. Let's make some changes to what the alarm workflow is. Let's make some changes to how you respond to the patient, and continually using data, using results to inform better choices on what to do. And that is something that I think an awful lot of vendors, when they're selling a solution to a hospital, don't focus on. They focus on selling the solution. One of the things that really excites me about Alero is the mindset that it's the same as we have, that really, the process starts once the customer goes live. That's when you start really working with the customer to help them take care of their patients. You work with the nurses, the nursing staff, you work with leadership, you collect data, you look at things objectively, and we use our collective experience across our entire customer bases to bring best practices forward so that those customers can get more effective use. And really, it's, you could label it continuous improvement or whatever you want, but it's really about helping the customer continually get the most out of solutions that they've chosen to implement in their hospital. And that is something that is sorely needed in a lot of areas. And I'm very excited to be working with Alero on that, because that is a huge strength of the organization in bringing that clinical consulting to continually improve with the solutions that are being put in place and get more value, better results, and for our particular tool, getting safer patients, getting them home. One of the biggest things that we think about is that grandmother or grandfather who's in the hospital, and we want to get them home safely to their family, to their grandkids. And it's not just getting our tool out there, it's having the people that are helping the nurses use it more effectively that is making that become a reality.
Well, what always excited me once I learned more and more about Ocuvera was, number one, the headline being practical tools to be part of a larger safety fall prevention ecosystem, if you will. And then the idea that there is no magic here, that in the end, the collaboration between the core technology, the back-end software, all the research you guys have done, whatever integrators are involved, and the customer allows for a sustainable approach to doing this. And as you said, lots of failed technologies in hospitals whereby the expectation was magic, and then the reality set in. And I'm so happy that you emphasized the transparency of Ocuvera as a company and the practical realities of what it's going to take to be successful with it. Let me shift gears. So an important part as you're talking to people is financial education and the relationship between the financial implications of falls and the things that you can do to do better around those kinds of things. So why don't you talk to me about the financial impact of falls and how your solutions can help mitigate those costs?
Sure. The financial cost of falls is something that really isn't well understood in most hospitals. That one of the things that I've run across, people who work in hospitals don't realize that when a patient falls in the hospital, it's not the patient's insurance that's responsible to cover those costs. It's the hospital's responsibility. That's law. That's the way it works. That if a patient falls and needs a CT scan and then needs surgery because they hit their head, those costs are borne by the hospital. That those extra days in the hospital, those are borne by the hospital. Yet all of those costs don't fall under somebody's clear budget. Those dollars oftentimes kind of get muddied and lost, and it's leakage if you want to look at it in financial terms. But there's a very well-known expert on falls, in Dr. Pat Quigley. She finished a huge study about a year ago that determined that the cost of a fall, the cost of one fall in a hospital, is in excess of $60,000 cost to the hospital. Most executives don't know that, don't realize that. And so they don't see that a hospital may have millions of dollars of costs from falls, but yet they know that it is a never event. It is something that you have to spend money and time on to try to prevent, but they don't realize just how high that cost is. Um, and that is something that we try to tackle head on, and say that we will reduce the hospital's costs of falls. And to, the story that's maybe not funny, but it's when we first were selling our solution, we kept talking about how we'll save you money by reducing falls, save you money by reducing falls, and it really fell flat. And what we finally learned when we dug into it was hospitals, they didn't even think about reducing costs of falls. They looked at, oh, we're going to buy a solution to reduce falls, and that's going to cost us more money. But we just have to bear that cost because we have to reduce, we're supposed to reduce falls. We're supposed to show that we're doing what we can. And one by one with our customers, as we were able to show them that they were saving 2-3 times what they were paying us, and we actually helped them dig into their budgets and see, look, you have this many fewer falls with injury. That is this many different costs that you've saved, this many reductions in length of stays, this much reduction in use of in-person sitters. When they sort of analyze that and seeing that how much they were saving, that really helped us understand, wait a minute, hospitals don't look at fall prevention as a cost saving measure because they don't see the cost of falls. So if you think about one fall is going to cost $60,000, you could spend a lot of money to reduce falls and come out ahead. But nowadays, if you look at financial impacts, say the cost of a sitter might cost $15 or $18 an hour if you have a staffed position as a sitter who can go into the hospital room. But oftentimes now, especially, the person that's sitting in a room watching a patient is not a staffed sitter. It's a nurse who's getting paid for an additional shift, or it's someone else who you're paying $40, $50, $60 an hour. When you look at their fully loaded cost and all of their ads for working in the evening or working weekends or working an extra shift, that's a huge cost. But perhaps the greatest cost is when you don't have a sitter at all. And so that patient has no intervention, but they're a high fall risk. And then they fall. And then now you have that $60,000 cost. I think looking at how we help mitigate it, it's reducing and nearly eliminating injurious falls because that's where the costs are, and then drastically reducing the need to use in-person sitters. And there are a lot of solutions out there that use virtual sitters and someone watching a screen, but you're still paying a person to watch the patient. You still have to hire and staff for that position. When nowadays you can just use AI, use something like Ocuvera to let that watch the patient.
And remote patient monitoring in general is problematic because it's very hard to pay attention to a lot at the same time, right? So your sort of hybrid of using the technology to sense what's going on and then bringing people in, as opposed to somebody, face it, looking at a screen for hours and hours is pretty boring.
Yeah, it is, and it's while you can do that and you can find people, it doesn't always work. And one of the things that we hear is well, we've got this virtual sitting program, but we run into problems when the person's talking to one patient and somebody else is getting out of bed, or if they aren't able to properly redirect that patient and stop them from getting out of bed, the method for that remote person to get a hold of a nurse and get the nurse in the room is just very clumsy and cumbersome. And so we've heard time and time again that, yeah, virtual sitters work until they don't. That it's great until you have to get a nurse, and then you just know the patient's going to fall because it's too late. And that's not proper integration of technology and solutions. It's technology that has some benefits, but then has some costs and impacts, and you're making nurses' jobs harder. And the other thing that we've actually been hearing the last year or so is that nurses they want to be able to care for their patients. They're on the floor. They want to provide the care. They don't like someone else in some remote location who doesn't even work for the hospital watching their patient and talking to their patient. They want to be the ones doing that. And that's where the right blend of technology, where let AI stare at the screen and watch a patient. And when there's a concern, let that patient's nurse know that they need to talk to them. That's really allowing the nurse to keep the care of patients in their hands, for them to keep more time at the bedside with their patients, because they aren't burdened with having to continually check in. They don't have someone remotely talking to the patient while they're not. They can keep that relationship with the patient, and that's really important nowadays. Because nurses are doing this because they care about people, and if you take them away from the people, take away their safety from them, you're taking away some of what's fulfilling to them.
So let's go back a little bit to the practicality part of this. So this is not an all or nothing situation. So Ocuvera could be deployed on a unit or in a select area on a unit, or it could be enterprise wide. Talk a little bit about that from a implementation and ongoing support perspective. How have people been doing it? Do they start small? Do they grow big? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, you bet. So as we were developing our solution, as we were learning about how products are brought into hospitals, it's always a pilot. First, we want to do a pilot, see if we like it, see if it works, and then we'll decide if we want to buy it and put it across the whole hospital. Um, that's challenging with something like a fall prevention tool, because you need to use it for a long enough period of time to really see the impact. And you need to use it in more than one or two rooms. So what we focus on is working with the hospital, getting them to understand the value of Ocuvera, and then we'll pick one unit. Usually it's a med surge unit, because that's usually one of the highest fall rate units, and it's got kind of the general population of patients, and we'll help them get it implemented in one unit. And that's another aspect of Ocuvera, is it's very lightweight on the IT side. It's very easy to teach nurses how to use it, and it's very easy to know when to use it. So it's not a huge impact to get it implemented and deployed into one unit. You can literally do it in a few days, um, and you can then use it across that unit. You can see the results. You can see how nurses are using it, and then make decisions of whether to expand further within the hospital to ortho units, rehab units, things like that. So you could put it in the places that have the highest level of falls, and then if it's appropriate, get it into other units that have lower rates of falls but still have a problem. And that's important, I think, because if it's an all or nothing solution, it's there's no one size fits all across the hospital, and it's a lot easier to get approval to go into one unit. It's a lot easier to have a champion that looks at one unit and let the results speak for themselves, quite literally. And we've seen time and time again, we get into one hospital unit, we work with them, and then they are the ones that are selling Ocuvera to the rest of the hospital. Nurses will move to a different unit and they'll ask, well, why don't we have Ocuvera here? And that really they do the job of selling to expand within that hospital, and then to expand across other hospitals in that system as well. Or even we've seen expansion in the same city as a nurse changes positions from one hospital to another hospital.
So I'm a tech guy, amongst other things. And so let's talk a little bit about technology. So you made a choice to use Microsoft ecosystem for doing your thing. Now, the cool thing about that, in my experience, is that hospitals tend to be pretty Microsoft centric. You're going to find Windows everywhere in the enterprise. So tell me a little bit about that. And then when you're done, talk a little bit about how you would connect to other things and other ecosystems, and what's your perspective on that?
Sure, you bet. Yeah. So, when you're developing a solution that's going to be used in hospitals, security is near the top of importance. And part of security is familiarity with things. That hospital IT, they know Microsoft technologies, they know the security risks, they know the mitigations that are there, they know that it's not a black box. So from a technology standpoint, we use Microsoft operating system on our devices. That makes them feel more comfortable that it's secured. And we use Microsoft technologies in the back end for things like our reporting and analytics portal. We use Microsoft Power BI. That allows hospital data and analytics folks who more and more are using Power BI for their own dashboards and reporting systems to very easily integrate and bring our reports, our analytics into their own dashboards. That I haven't run across a hospital yet that isn't effectively running on Microsoft. And so having that is really brings a familiarity, and it brings leverage, quite honestly, to make things easier. When you've got one dashboard that can show whatever information that's internal to the hospital with internal data, and along with that, you can show reports from an external system that a vendor has, like Ocuvera, and you can correlate those things. That's pretty powerful for insights on how to make decisions. I guess that kind of leads into your second question of working with vendors and ecosystem. One of the things that I'm excited about on our partnership with Alero is the integrations that Alero has with Nurse Call and RTLS systems, and other technologies that are helping nurses be more effective. The mobile workflow, being able to have Ocuvera data and alarms integrated with the Alero platform is going to just make things easier, smoother, lower friction for everybody at the hospital. And as you have those integrations with Nurse Call, you're going to be able to, I really think, evolve the of what Nurse Call is. You think about it as you've got the Pello speaker, you've got the light outside the room, you've got phone at the nurse's station, and other pieces. Being able to leverage that from an alarming and a workflow perspective to add in Ocuvera, to be able to have alarming workflow analytics of Ocuvera layered on top of all of that. I think we're going to see it better insights than you have with Ocuvera alone. I think you're going to see easier usage for nurses than just with Ocuvera alone. So our approach, I guess, in a nutshell, of integration is to work with a partner like Alero to have those integrations and bring us in as a piece of a larger solution, a larger consulting situation for a hospital, so that they're getting all of the right pieces of technology to apply to the workflows, to the clinical needs that they have.
And one of the great things about being here in 2025 and beyond is that healthcare used to be, and still is to a large extent, pretty tribal from a technology standpoint. And there's a lot of closed environments where other people can't play per se. But what I know about Ocuvera inherently, you don't desire to take over the world, and you want to play well with others. Am I characterizing that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether it's at the core of with fall prevention, there is no one tool that does it all. It's a multitude of tools, a multitude of practices that do that, and we're one piece of that. We're very humble in our approach that we are a tool that nurses use in their quest to provide safer patient care. And whether that is our tool and a competitor's tool together, that's fine with us. That we're really driven by reducing falls, by preventing deaths in hospitals, and we aren't the solution. We're a tool that helps the hospital develop their solution, and the more that they have the best tools in their toolbox, the better they're going to do. And whether it's because they used Ocuvera to prevent a fall, or whether they used a competitor's product and prevented a fall, but within workflows that we help them implement and choose the right tool, as long as we're playing a part, then I think our mission's fulfilled, and I can go to bed each night happy that we're doing what we can to bring cost out of healthcare and to bring safety up in healthcare.
So, cool thing about talking to folks like yourself, you're an entrepreneur. You can dream big, you can play, you can fall down, you can get up. So now that you have enough runway under you, what's ahead? Let's talk a little bit about the future.
Sure. I wish I had a really cool, sexy answer, but I'm not a cool, sexy guy. I'm really practical. And so, I'm trying to look far into the future to see what we can do, where things are going. But the steps that we're taking, I think, are really practical, and they're really focused around results. I think, we want to help bring tools that allow more effective use of technology and less friction at the point of care. Meaning, with mobile devices that nurses are going to be using, how do we help those mobile devices allow the nurse to do their job better? Whether that's talking to a virtual staff member, or whether that's looking up something with what they see with the patient, or whether that's receiving information that something in our AI has found. That's something that's important. Along with that is really watching this whole virtual nursing movement, if you will, and to see what really shakes out as the best value use cases. I think that there was so much hype in virtual nursing very quickly.
I'm gonna stop you for a second. So we're trying to remind ourselves to not say virtual nursing anymore. We say virtual care, because it's a spectrum of things, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that is it. And I think that at the end of the day, a patient is in the hospital and there is a team of people that is trying to help that patient improve their condition and get home. And whether that is someone who is physically on the floor, physically touching the patient, or if that's someone who is located elsewhere who can assist the nurse or assist the patient or assist someone else and make them more efficient, more effective. If you want to call that virtual care, then I believe there's value in that, and being able to play a part in that from a technology standpoint is really important to us. We're building a lot in that area. Along that same lines, being able to allow the full family to be involved with the patient and their care and their healing is really important. And if you want to call that virtual care as well, that's an area that there's no reason why a grandmother shouldn't be able to talk to their grandson from their bed in a way that's very easy, very frictionless, and secure for the hospital IT staff. There are things that we're working on there. An area that we were pursuing, and we are very happy to offload that, is having much deeper involvement in clinical consulting. I've talked about that at length during this, but the more that we can work with nursing staff, the more effective those tools will be. And I'm thrilled to be working with Alero on that, because that is just speaking to the choir. We're looking at things. We're using Ocuvera for helping prevent pressure injuries. That's rolling out, in fact, this month to some of our customers. Being able to help track and monitor rounding protocols are important. Those are, most of these things aren't exciting and sexy, but they're important. And if we can improve the effectiveness of staff, then there's value to the hospital, there's value to the nurse. And nurses are innovative, they are entrepreneurial. They take whatever they've got at their disposal and they use it in the ways that are most effective for them. And if we can build different tools that they can put in their toolbox and pull out and use to make them more effective, to allow them to spend more time at the bedside, then there's value there. And so a lot of things around that, right around the nurse, that the nurse is the center of our universe.
Excellent. What I love about what you guys have done and where you're at is, I'll use the word maturity. So there's so much of a rush to kind of outflank the other guy when you are on the technology creator side of things. And it feels like you guys have been leaning in on, hey, we understand how to do this. We can help people get it done. And it's sustainable. And really, it feels like you're in a position to exponentially grow the base of people because you're ready.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's true. I think we have, we've never been in a rush. We certainly operate with a sense of urgency. There have been events that have happened in my life while we've been building Ocuvera that are very unfortunate. And my grandmother fell and broke her hip and then subsequently passed away. We didn't have Ocuvera in a position to be used by her in time. We had one of our investors who sadly fell and passed away. They weren't in a position to be using Ocuvera yet. So from that standpoint, we have a sense of urgency because the faster we can move, the more people that we can help get back home. But at the same time, rushing before things are ready, getting ahead of ourselves doesn't help in the long run. And we're not trying to prevent that death tomorrow. We're trying to prevent thousands of deaths in the next decade. And I think that takes a pragmatic approach. Hospitals are designed to resist change so that they can operate in an extremely chaotic environment efficiently. And they're not going to rush to just buy the next sexy thing. They're going to look at what really is effective and spend their dollars carefully, especially now. 10 years ago that was a little bit different, but dollars are scarce and they're being cautious. And I think that our approach of doing the same is working well. There's always more opportunity. There's always an opportunity to learn from those that are pioneering and build it better. But at the end of the day, it's when our customers are ready, we want to be there with more tools that are effective for them. And I think it's being at the right time, not being ahead of time. I think there was too many times that I was involved in building technologies and things that were too far ahead of their time. There wasn't a market yet. I think we've learned a lot from that, and just by spending so much time with hospitals, with customers, with nurses, it keeps us grounded, it keeps us aware of the problems at hand today, and that informs what we build, how we build it, when we build it, and when we bring it to market so that it's proper. This is maybe getting a little bit off topic, but Ocuvera is the 5th company that I've been involved in building from scratch, and it's the last. And when we started Ocuvera, I always said, this is the last time I'm going to do this. And I want to do it right. And I want to do it for the long term. And we'll take on as much pain as possible in the short, medium term to make the right long-term decisions. And as a team, we have really stayed true to that. And I think that it's become just an intrinsic part of our DNA now. And so we always are thinking long term. And if that means we take hits in the short term, so be it. It doesn't really faze us. We want to be there for the long term for our customers, for patients, and for each other.
Thank you so much. I loved our conversation. I loved how authentic you are and how true to your mission you are. So very much appreciated.
Thank you, Kenny. I very much appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it's been great. So those of you watching, thanks for Steve joining us. And you can go to ocuvera.com, OCUVERA.com. I got that right?
Yep.
All right, excellent. We'll have links in the show notes for that. I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe to this podcast so you can get notified when we release our next episodes. And if you want to go back and check out old episodes, go to www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. That's www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening. See you guys on the next episode.